to another episode of the Church Things podcast, where, believe it or not, we talk about church things. And today in the studio, it's just me and Tim, but we are going to be talking about this phrase, help, I don't have any friends, and how we can find friendship, relationship at church, and what all does that entail? What does that look like? And today we're primarily going to be talking about finding friends in the context of small groups. We believe in the power of small groups. And so, Tim, just to start, how does this often play out? People looking for relationships, maybe we had a couple visit our small group last night, and they said, we just moved to Fort Smith. We've been here for a few months, and we're just looking to put our roots down and form some relationships, and so they're trying out our small group.
For us at Central, we do a whole lot of things in a small group setting, from our Bible studies to our 242 groups, student ministry, college ministry. All of that has a component of smaller groups that create that sense of community or create opportunities for community.
Yeah. I think there is something different about it's like there's a reason that people go to church looking for relationships there. It's not because they don't have relationships outside of church. It's not because I couldn't go and get that at bingo night and Rotary Club and my kids' T-ball league. I can be friends with the parents there. But what would you say it is that, like, what is it that's different about, say, a 242 group and the relationships that you're going to form in there versus my relationships with the parents on the T-ball team?
Yeah. So I think just the nature of what we do from a faith perspective has a level of depth that we don't get to experience in other places. And sometimes it's as simple as, who am I praying with?
Yeah.
For me, I was challenged years ago by an Oswald Chambers post. He wrote it 100 years ago, by one of his daily devotions that was about praying for your enemies. And he said, because when you take people before the Lord, it's really hard to have enemies, when you're praying for them, or even about them. I've had some folks I prayed about. And so there's an intimacy that happens within the context of our faith that I don't think you get at the baseball field, and you don't get it. What'd you say, bingo night?
I was drawing a lot of blanks because I don't hang out at a whole lot of other places
or the bowling alley, and so there is something that transcends those surface level things. And that's not to say that we don't have phenomenal friends or deep relationships outside of our faith circles, but that within the context of faith, when you get into that level of intimacy and vulnerability, I think there's something that happens. And so for me, at least experientially, when we do life with other people, when we've had medical issues or we've had difficult things in our family, because of that intimacy, those people that we're closest to in our faith circles have been like family, and they're the ones that show up with food or that call and say, "Hey, I'm just praying for you today." And so there's an intimacy that happens because of faith that I don't think exists in other places.
Yeah, and I think we need that. Like, I think we need those relationships, and I think often we don't realize we need those relationships until we're in that place of, I'm in the hospital and I need somebody to bring my food or some food to my kids, and so it's like it's better to figure out those relationships now. And I also think that those relationships are on the decline outside of the church. I remember a number of years ago there was a famous book called Bowling Alone, and it was about how the drop off in the last 25 years of these other institutions, these other social groups aren't seeing as many people join and things like that. And so I think the church does step into that void and provide that.
I think certainly they should. Mm-hmm. one of the difficult things is I think oftentimes we don't recognize that until the trials come.
Yeah, exactly.
And then at that point, and of course, I mean, we've been in the church world long enough to know that there are folks who they experience the crisis, or they experience the difficult season, and then respond, well, where was the church? It's like, well, you weren't connected. You need that connectivity when there are hard times, but that's built on those relationships that are cultivated in the daily routine and doing life together, and so I think oftentimes when we talk about friendships and community, and that happens in the routine, that happens in the system, not in the specific events.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think that's hard. I think like that is what's difficult about some of it is just it's day in, day out. It's every week.
Yeah.
And
we're busy.
Yeah.
I mean, our culture pulls at us in every direction and says we're supposed to build relationships at the ball field and at bingo night and at the bowling alley and in our kids' school. And we wind up in just stretched from one end to the other with, we're stretched wide, but we don't go deep.
Yeah.
And I think it's the investment in those deep relationships that winds up being so incredibly valuable down the road. Those investments are the ones that pay off. And I think because of faith, I think because of our connections in church, there's some real value in that.
Yeah, I think it's kind of changing gears, but one of the things that I've seen is, at least people that grew up in the church, we almost take for granted how built in a lot of those relationships can be, because of the nature of, we do a lot of age-based ministry from birth until about college. And so, starting out, I'm always in a group of people, of peers that are my age, and we're all, going through something together, learning content at the same level. And so whether that's youth group, kids church, or, now, you're in college and you go to a college age Bible study, you're in a college age small group. And then we get outside of that, we graduate, we, maybe get married, and now we're in the church, and it's like, wait, where are the people my age? Where are my people? Where are my friends? And I think that's something that we see a lot, and that's what would you say to that? What would you?
I think there's a little bit of shift that has to take place, and I cut my teeth on student ministry and children's ministry, and I've run the gamut of different age-based groups. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I think oftentimes we overlook is the fact that even with those age-based things, we are intentionally putting older people with younger people. We're putting experienced people with new believers, and people who are maybe more mature or have life experience with those who are immature and don't have life experience. And so we've done it intentionally in those age-based demographics. Mm-hmm. I mean, you do it with college students. You're intentionally connecting 18 to 25-year-olds with people that have wives and husbands and kids and jobs and careers.
Just this week I was talking to some students that went on the ski trip with us last year. And last year, one of the leaders that we brought was Randy Todd Hunter. Yeah. And this couple that I was talking to, they're getting married, they're engaged. And I was talking about doing premarital with them. And I told them, I said, hey, just so you guys know, I'm not going to do the finance one with you, and I'm going to encourage you guys to either go talk to Tim Beasley, or because that's who I went to and talked to about my finances. And they said, you know what, we should call Randy Todd Hunter. He wrote that book on finance, and we would love to sit down and talk with him. We haven't got to catch up since we went on the ski trip, and so it's like it doesn't maybe click until later. It's like, oh well, that's why that was a good thing. That
and the cool thing in there is, because intentionally we've connected them in ways that are not necessarily, we don't connect people and say, this is going to pay dividends because you're going to be able to go see this guy. It's the relational stuff that happens. And in the context of that relationship and community, we see this discipleship comes out of that.
Yeah.
So we do that intentionally with age based ministry. But you're right. There comes a point where we've kind of graduated out of all of the age based
between
stuff.
25 and 55 is what we say. Yeah.
Yeah, and then at 55 we do an age based thing again.
Yeah,
In fact, while we're recording this, our legacy group is got a meet and greet thing going on, but in that 25 to 35 or 25 to 55 group, they're still age based. There's still common life events. There's still, there are a bunch of parents who have preschoolers who are trying to connect and go, hey, how do you handle your preschools? Yeah.
Tiny terrorist that lives in my house. That's me. I'm one of those parents right now.
He started talking, and I'm not sure that I can handle this.
He mostly just says no.
Yeah. And so there's some real value in being able to connect those folks together.
Yeah.
So that just because there's some accountability in it.
Yeah.
But also to connect those folks with somebody who's raised their kids.
Yeah.
Stephanie and I, when our kids were young, tried to be students of parents who were either finished raising their kids or who were well beyond where we were. And there was a whole lot of gleaning good information and bad information. We'd ask parents, so how'd you handle this? And they're like, well, we didn't handle it well. And so
that's why I do think it's good, because I even just this week I was talking to some college kids who want to join a 242 group at the church.
Yeah.
And one of the things they said was, is there a group with young people in it? Like, is there a group of just a bunch of young people? And it's kind of funny because we're still kind of in that mode that's what we're thinking. But I remember even just this week in small group, Roger, Benita Holroyd, we're talking about when they were first married and younger. They lived in Texas, and they were in a small group with young parents. And they were talking about how they learned a lot from that, and just, kind of being in that same stage of life. But then I was thinking about it from, because I'm holding my son in their small group. I'm like, I'm so grateful that I get to come to this group. And there's young parents in my group. There's some people who are the same age, but we also have some old people who their kids are my age, right. And so they're getting to impart that almost grandparent wisdom, even though their kids don't have kids yet. It's like, but they've already been through that. And so even just the grace that I get from them when, Shepherd is just acting like a crazy person in their house, it's like, they're like, another parent's like, oh yeah, I don't know what to tell you, sorry, but they're like, hey, we've been down this road a few times, and you're gonna make it, and you need to stay here and eat a plate of food, and it's gonna be okay.
Let me have that, Tara.
Exactly.
I'll take them to the other room so you guys can relax.
Yeah.
And there's something about too. I mean, getting back to your presenting question here, the discussion primer, if you will, that what do we do for friends? And there is, I think oftentimes we think of friends as a peer, somebody who is the same age, same place in life, and I'm going to tell you, some of the best friends that I've ever had were people who were leaning into me, who had raised their kids, when I was beginning to raise mine, who had walked in ministry for years when I was just beginning. Yeah. And so when we talk about friendship, for me, the friend is that person who's investing. And sometimes it feels a little lopsided that they're investing more in me than I am in them.
Yeah.
But there's a little bit of a pay it forward kind of mentality.
Yeah.
And I think that, when you talk about relationships and friendships and accountability, I think Jesus models that.
Yeah.
I think about he had the multitudes. He had the 70. He had the 12. He had the 3.
Yeah.
And I think there's a place for relationship in each of those. And so I do think that Jesus had close friends.
Yeah.
I think one of the things too that is difficult, and it's one of the questions that we've wrestled with as a pastoral staff team, and that is, this idea that we live in a culture that says, I need you to meet my needs. That's the important thing. Without maybe as much emphasis as on how do I meet your needs.
Yeah.
And it creates for us this consumer mindset that we pick our stores on how convenient is it for me. We pick our schools on how much can I get.
We've turned everything into a commodity. And now that's gotten to the point where we view people as a commodity.
And so oftentimes, relationally, last sermon I preached was about conflict in the Jerusalem Council, and there is so much of just our culture that says this is about me and it's not about you.
Yeah.
And so I think we've got to address that and maybe change some of that mindset that in our relationships it does go both ways. And so those times where I need you to be engaged in my life really does. There are times that you need me to be engaged in your life.
Yeah.
And I think culturally we are pushed towards, this is about me. And I think from a kingdom perspective, it's often about taking care of the others.
Yeah.
And it may be too simplistic, but in my marriage, the one thing that has worked has been if I have tried to outserve my wife and she has tried to outserve me, that works really well for our needs are met relationally, and I am well fed, and I am my house is a nice place to be, and it's because she has made an effort to make sure those things happen, and then I try to do the same thing.
Yeah,
she's better at it than I am.
Yeah, but
our attempt is not what's in this for me, but what's in that for the other person.
Yeah.
And so I think there's probably some spiritual component to that, and I think there's.
Sure. I think the model that you're talking about is Christ in the church, you know, and so it's funny almost because it's like we view the more tangible as a marriage, but really the place that we get the example of marriage is supposed to be church, which is your small group, right? And so you're supposed to go to small group looking to see how you can serve other people, and in that almost already starts to deal with some of the stuff you got going on because you're kind of getting out of your own head and you're looking to attend to the needs of other people. But also if of the other people in your small group are doing that, like you're talking about in your marriage, they're going to take care of your needs too, and so
let me turn the tables on you. What is, and I'll ask you the question. So what is the, how do we know if we're doing it right? What's the model for, we know Acts 2:42, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, fellowship, breaking of bread, and prayer. Those are the components. Those are the pieces that we shuffle around. But how do we know if we're successful in that? I mean, how would somebody know, I'm looking for friends, I'm looking for community, I'm looking for relationships. How do we know? What's the measure for that?
Yeah. I think, I think we kind of just even what we're just talking about with the example of Christ in the church and then even how we see that play out in marriage, I think maybe even just start with where can I find a group where I can serve people? Where can I find a group where I can look to meet the needs of other people? And if that is in a small group, which we hope everyone in our church is in a 242 group, and not just in a 242 group, but a Bible study, and you have a ministry and things like that. But if you're looking, if that's what you're going to start with, how am I going to take care of the people around me, the people in my sphere of influence? I think the natural byproduct of that is that, you're going to end up having your needs met as well because you're going to be taking care of the people around you. And I know just even from my small group, just watching the way, and you kind of shared about this. It's just like when hardships and trials and things like that come, watching the way my small group is taking care of Gabby and I in those times, that's changed the way that Gabby and I come to small group and want to. When we find out something's going on with somebody, we're like, well, let me, bring them food. Let me write them a note. I'm going to text them this week, checking up on them. And that's all not because I just intrinsically knew to do that when I first started coming to small group. It's because someone did it for me, and because someone served me, that changed the way I want to serve them.
I think, too, using what is our model for small groups in Acts chapter 2 and Acts chapter 4, it uses this phrase that they had everything in common.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes we're like, oh, you can borrow my truck, or you can, we'll have a meal together. But I think it's even more intimate than that, and that is when you have a victory, I feel the victory, and when you have pain, I feel the pain.
Yeah.
And we have those things in common, and so sometimes it's as simple as, who are the people that you could walk into their house and open their fridge, and help yourself.
Yeah.
And so those relationships that have been the closest for us, refrigerator rights all day long.
Yeah.
It's the folks that you can laugh with, and that you can joke with, and that you can kind of poke at a little bit, but know that we have all things in common.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. What do you do when things aren't great, when the relationship might be broken? Maybe there's some tension, there's some awkwardness, somebody was hurt. What is that? Because we all, if you've been in a small group for any amount of time, or any group of people,
if you've been married, if you've worked on a church staff, if you've
been to school, if you've
the question
with
there
other people
is conflict. What do we do when there is conflict? What do we do when brokenness happens? And I think it happens. We see examples of strong, lovely Christian leaders who have had difficulty. Galatians 2, Peter and Paul. These are the
pillars of
these
the
are
church.
the pillars, right?
Yeah.
It's like you got the first pope and the guy that went to the Gentiles, and it's like, and they're at odds. And Paul says, I confronted him to his face. That's tension. And so what do we do when there's brokenness? I think if you have not experienced brokenness, even in the church, that either you're just oblivious, or it's you're the offender.
Yeah.
And so it does happen. And there are times when relationships get broken. And so I think, again, that's part of that intimacy of doing life together. We have models, we have examples for confrontation. Sometimes the sin or the brokenness rises to the level of we have to deal with it. We have Jesus was very clear that with confrontation and forgiveness. Matthew 18 covers both of those.
Yeah.
That we go and confront, and we take somebody with us we take it to the church. But also in that same passage of Scripture, Peter asked, well, how many times should I forgive? And the Lord's very clear there. There is no limit.
Yeah.
You continue to forgive.
People ask us, how many times do I have to keep going back to this small group? We just say 70 times 7 is what we tell them. So
every week at 7:00, whatever time. Yeah. So I think there is a reality that we, when we live in community, that even the community is being sanctified. We're a work in progress. We're not done yet, and that community is ever changing, and probably even more today than it ever has been. Which is part of why I think the question comes up. Hey, I'm doing life alone. How do I connect?
Yeah.
And so I think there's a real need for us to be just part of the daily routine is that we forgive and that we communicate and that we do life together, because in community, you and I spend a lot of time together professionally, but we have a personal relationship. And if you offend me and I come and say, look, dude, we're at odds.
Yeah.
We'll work it out. because we live in community.
Yeah.
If I offend you, you'll come to me. Well, I think you would, and say, "Hey, I'm way off. I think you were off base."
Yeah.
And then we would be quick to forgive.
Yeah.
It's
And I think that's part of just even in the Christian life, that's what living in the truth means. Believing the truth, speaking the truth.
Yeah.
Because we believe that Jesus is the truth. And I think that practically, sometimes like we can come into the church or relationships with an idea that like, no, these people aren't supposed to do stuff like that. They're Christians. They're not supposed to, say hurtful things or ever cross me or, and so then when those things do happen, what that's part of what that's showing is that we're not actually living in reality. And as Christians, if we're supposed to be, seeking the truth is that people are going to hurt us at times. And that's why Jesus gives us these commands on how to still love one another, call one another to repentance, and then ultimately forgive one another.
And that does require a level of humility.
Yeah.
That I think is also unique to the faith community.
Yeah.
We are more interested in serving other people. We submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. We consider others' needs more important than our own.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a level of humility that comes with living in community. But again, I think that goes back to that's the investment.
Yeah.
Because that always pays dividends.
I was just saying, it's not just the like, grit your teeth and just get over it and do this. It's going to be hard. It's like, no, that like all the times that I had to deal with those situations in relationships, like those didn't just pay dividends in that relationship. It paid dividends in this other relationship. The next time I had conflict, or the next time somebody hurt me, or the next time somebody came to me and said sorry, and I thought to myself, "Oh man, you have no idea. Like you're good," And it's because we've been trying to live out this model for a while, and so.
So, for us, there's a component of this living in community that and the relationship. I think for us, at least as far as our church goes, we have created some really easy avenues to connect there.
Yeah.
And I think it's valuable, and I don't know that we can say it enough because it's like we get into a routine, we get into a rut, we have to go to work, we have to take care of our kids, we have to, go on a date with our wife, we have to do these things. And I think we can neglect those other areas that provide the relational, for our relational needs. And so for us, our small group ministry is kind of the no-brainer. It's like that is the front line for pastoral care, for community. It is where we have all things in common. Yeah. I think we do a pretty good job with at least offering Bible studies. And that's not, it's a little bit different than a small group in that we're not necessarily in our homes, but we are gathering together around a specific book or a specific study topic.
For the purpose of studying with one another still. Yeah.
And there's, I don't know that we can study scripture together without crossing that threshold of intimacy, because it is impossible for us to agree 100% on everything that is, we're going to come at it with different life experience and presuppositions but I'll just tell you, for me, one of the testimonies, my favorite Bible study that I've ever been in is the study we do on Friday mornings with our men. We're going chapter a week, which the guys that are watching this podcast or listening to it are already rolling their eyes because we haven't done a whole chapter in a week in like years. And we do a chapter a week, or we try to do a chapter a week, and we square off and we talk about stuff and we're challenged. And even for those of us who have different opinions, we still walk out of there and go, wow, that was really good. We squared off today. We got a square off place. We really went toe to toe in search of the truth and walk out of there with a deeper community. Yeah. I know we got a couple of ladies' Bible studies that they have that same testimony, that they just really love digging in together
Yeah.
into the Word. And of course, our Sunday morning Bible studies are a good place to connect. Student ministry, kids ministry, college ministry.
Yeah.
Those are all places where intentionally we get smaller, so that we can have those more intimate relationships.
Yeah. And so if you're listening to this and you want more information on, how can I get involved in whether it's a Bible study or a 242 group, or maybe you're just looking for a place to serve. I was even thinking about just serve in the kids ministry with, another adult and with a small army of kids, and you're going to get pretty close with that adult that you're serving with, because you're like
back to back.
Yeah,
baby.
exactly.
Yeah, we're fighting off a common enemy.
Yeah. And so, but yeah, email us, grab one of us on Sunday morning at the church. We'd love to get you connected into wherever you want to get connected. And so
I would say maybe the easiest way to connect with us, we have an email address that's set up to go to all of our staff team. It's just staff@centralfs.org. And so whether it's connecting in the ministry specifically or connecting with a small group, that's an easy way to do that, because you're going to get Jeff, who's responsible for small groups, or Blake, who's got college students, or Braxton, who's doing students, or our kids ministry. And so
so shoot us an email, staff@centralfs.org. We'd love to hear from you. And until then, we will see you next time.